Okay. Now, we all know that lots of us have a side hustle. And in general, most people understand and are supportive of that. But what happens when somebody's actually holding two jobs that are competing for each other's attention and they're doing it on the DL so that neither of their employers knows about it? Apparently, this is a thing. We're hearing about it in the news. Alisa, give us a scoop.
My gosh. Well, it was both of you that alerted me to this. And then I went down the rabbit hole of what's happening out there. And it's, um, I was reading a Forbes article, and I think that they they said it the best. Like the first rule of Fight Club, you don't tell anyone and you don't do too much. So I think that it's really interesting, and I think that companies shouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's that taboo conversation. You may have this side hustle that you're doing, and you may have some downtime in your workday from your first job. And I think everybody's responded to an email here or there, or sent a project off for their side hustle. But we're talking full-time jobs, people juggling two full-time jobs and getting two really robust salaries and comp packages, bonuses. We're talking the whole nine yards here. Um, so I think it's really interesting that it is something that's really coming to the forefront and becoming a less taboo topic. People have to make a living, and if you can do it in a way that is, you've got moxie, you can take that risk and toe the line with not going insane. Why not? If they're not in direct competition with the other job and you're able to get all of your work done, uh, well, why not?
Is it
I
though? Sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
No, I was gonna say I completely agree with you. I think that if you're in a position where it's not directly in competition or affecting your other work, and the other work isn't affecting the other work, I think why not? And I think that this is obviously a very situational thing.
Mhm.
I don't think a parent with children that has other life things going on can juggle all of this at once effectively without a ball dropping at some point. I
Yeah.
think that's good. That's a very difficult and tough ask. But I think for anyone that has the you called it moxie, but the schedule and the ability to handle two jobs at once and have the ability to save one salary completely while the other one pays for bills. I mean, that's awesome.
Mhm.
That's my personal take on it.
I think it's awesome too, but I also think it's a slippery slope because the articles I read said people weren't necessarily doing both jobs full time to the best of their abilities. They were letting things slip. And there was an ethical question
Mm.
of if you're not delivering at your fullest capacity to an employer who believes that they are retaining you for your full-time bandwidth, mental effort, energy, connections, full-time, 8 hours is how that's defined typically. And you're not giving that, is that an ethical thing to do?
That's interesting. And I think that in any scenario, you're going to have the bad apple that ruins it for the rest of us, right? Like, because
Right.
I think that there are people that could manage two jobs like very easily and effectively and not let one interfere with the other. I really do believe that. Now, do I think that there are other people out there taking advantage of the system and that do take advantage of any type of system? Yes. But do
Yeah.
I think that that should ruin it for anybody else that wants to really take advantage, at least during this time where we're able to work remotely and they're able to give their all to two separate jobs without it ethically? And I mean, again, there's a
Mhm.
moral compass here that we're relying on and hoping they have. I think that you're always going to have that person, those people out there that just want to take advantage of a good situation.
So here's a question for you, Lisa. As an employee,
Mhm.
say you can handle it all. Say you can handle two full-time jobs at full, very robust salaries, because what I read in these articles in Forbes and other places was people were making $600,000. So they weren't just doing what they could to get by. They were making, and that's fantastic if they can do that. Should you tell your employer or should you allow your employer to be under the impression that that you are only committed to them full time? And is that unethical to not be transparent and to let them be misled, basically? Because what we're talking about is really being misled, right?
Yeah. I think that we're going to see a lot of companies, if this is something that's going to continue and they want to retain a good employee who potentially is doing two full-time jobs, but it's not hindering what they're doing for their current company. I think we may see in this remote environment that companies contracts might shift. I think that if you have in your your start paperwork, there might be an NDA that you're signing. There may be a non-compete that you're signing. In that, I believe that the stipulation is you do have to notify if there is something else that you're doing. And I think even specifically if it's in direct competition. I'm conflicted about that because part of me wants to say, but on the other side of that, if you are working within, if a company is like, these are the hours that we need you to work, you need to be available between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And your second full-time job is taking you away from that, you need to have that conversation. Absolutely. That is an ethical thing. If you are available and doing your job and you're bringing in income, that's for personal reasons that you need this extra income. I don't necessarily personally feel that needs to be shared if it's not hindering your ability to effectively get your job done.
I agree with you, and I completely agree with the contracts kind of changing on onboarding, because I've been part of companies that at the very beginning say, "What other jobs do you potentially have?" And I do believe in transparency there. And to your point, Alisa, if both jobs are 9 to 5, and one of them is going to have a conflict, I always think it's going to get out,
It is.
especially in this day and age where all of our stuff is digitally everywhere online. There's going to be a slip, and then that just becomes a really awkward situation to have a conversation about after the fact, right? But to your point, if that none of that is like within a contractual thing where you're not, you haven't been asked or whatever, I do think it's up to you if it is going to interfere with your hours to have that conversation and just say, hey, this is really going to help me out. This is what I'm considering doing because I can do it effectively and I can promise you that. And if it doesn't work out for that person, maybe there's an opportunity then to say, well, are there more responsibilities I can take on, or even a salary increase to make up for the fact that I'm not going to be able to take this on because you're not comfortable with it, right?
Right. Right.
I'm just thinking it's like being in two romantic relationships at this
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was like, who am I really committed to here? Well, both of you, but I'm not going to tell you about each other. It's like watching an episode of The Bachelor.
It is. And, it's funny because, I think that's a perfect analogy because, you also have to be careful because I think no matter how buttoned up somebody is and how, they're able to juggle and multitask, I do think that trying to work 16 hours each day for two different companies, I do feel like we're all human and there's going to be a slip up. So having those conversations where, Vanessa, you called it out, where it's going to get out eventually. So why not just be very transparent about it? And if that way, if your boss is noticing you're slipping, you're not doing your job, then, that needs to be called to the table. I think that you also have to, if this is something you are considering doing, I do think that you have to be established and competent in, I'm calling it job one, before you seek out that second full-time job.
Right.
Good advice.
Absolutely.
And I also think that, this article really talks about white collared industries, tech, finance, insurance. This isn't something that everybody's able to do. It's not something that, for whatever it might be, people who, single parents who are just trying to make ends meet in their in their one full-time job. So I think it's important to recognize, and there are people in those situations who do need the income of two jobs.
You hit the nail on the head. I was just
Mhm.
thinking, I'm like, this isn't a novel concept. I mean, we hear about people that work 2, 3 jobs, to your point,
Mhm.
Alisa, because of the situation they're in, all the time. But this is a different type of workforce that we're speaking of. And if you have a salary and you have, that 9 to 5 situation, like, usually in those positions, your employer's under the impression, and I think, Sue, this is where you're coming from with the moral situation, is that they're expecting all of you for that amount of time and that you work solely for that organization.
Mhm.
So
Well, it's what you're leading them to expect. And so
Yeah.
I think that the takeaway for me is don't be misleading, right? And that's hard. I mean, I think it would be really hard for me if I had a full-time, highly salaried job and there was another full-time, highly salaried job that was also interesting to me that fit in my skill wheelhouse. And I knew I could double my income. Yeah, I totally get, wanting to do that. But I also think at the end of the day, you have to be transparent. You have to, first of all, with yourself, to
Yeah.
what you ladies have said, which is, can I really do 2 full-time jobs that are in conflict with the same work time? Transparent with yourself. And then it's hard, but you need to be, I think, transparent with your employers as well, because it sort of goes back to the golden rule, right? Like you would want that if you were in their situation. I just think things come back to bite you if
Mhm.
you're not um, upstanding about them. It comes to your own integrity. And I think this is all inevitable because we do live in a side hustle culture. And a side hustle, I think everybody's like, sure, yeah, she does that on the weekend or she does that in the evenings or blah, blah, blah. Or to what you were saying, Vanessa, about when people have a different type of job, or maybe they're in a service industry and they're doing they work several jobs on several different shifts. To me, that's a different animal than having 2 people who think that they hold the same place in your life when in fact they're both standing in the same spot.
Yeah.
So,
But I also want, there are situations, gig jobs, this gig economy that we work in now, that, and I don't know if this plays into the whole like salary with benefits and all that, but let's say you have that and you know that you can knock out projects quickly and it only takes you a certain amount of time, but it pays at a higher level. I think that's fair game, man. I really do. And I don't, and should it not really even affect anything? And I guess this goes all the way back to the whole transparency thing. That employer shouldn't have an issue with you doing it. And if they do, then that's a separate conversation and it's something that should be handled in a different way
Yeah.
versus
yeah.
keeping it to yourself and not being transparent about it.
Yeah, yeah, maybe that's, and I think it is. It's just, you're right. You're 100% right. We live in a gig economy now, and this is going to be more and more of a thing. The way we think about work is different, right? And the way we think about our employer is different, and the way we're working is different. So, Alisa, what are some questions that maybe a person who's in this situation should be asking themselves to know that they are handling it in a way that is fair to them and is and has integrity for their employer? Like, what do they ask themselves?
I think number one is this something realistically you could handle? Will having a second full-time job interfere with your current full-time job? Are you able to fairly and effectively give your time to both of these companies? Do you have the self-discipline to juggle and multitask? Why are you seeking out this second full-time position? What's going on in your current role that you're finding that you need to go and have this other full-time position?
I love that one.
I think it's really important to be self-aware and ask yourself what it is that you're doing, and how competent are you in your current role that you're ready to take on something else. And then I think for the ethical side of things, reflecting on, okay, is there a contract that I have signed with this company am I required to work a very certain schedule with this company? Would I be essentially infringing upon that time if I take on this other job? Is this other job can I successfully give each company that, going back to that first question of, can I give each company that fair amount of time in a day? And be available. So I think it's reflecting on just being realistic with yourself and then what you owe to each of these companies.
Alisa, how do you strike that conversation with your employers?
How do
How do
you
you bring it up? And what should you bring up? Like, how
Mhm.
should you articulate it? Like, what are the things that you should, if you have resistance, what are things that you put on the table? Like, how do you just strike up that conversation with your employer?
Yeah. Well, I think, you may have a specialized skill that you've developed from the current role, or that you're doing in your current role, that maybe this other company has recruited you and they want to have a conversation with you because of this specialized skill. Hey, I think having that conversation where I have this opportunity to take on this position within this other company because of this special skill set. It is not in direct competition with this role. It is something that I am interested in doing. It does require, full-time ish hours. And I want to have a transparent conversation with you to let you know that it is something that I'm taking on, that I'd like to take on. Is there any conflict with that? I will not allow it to impact, my day to day. And if at any point you are seeing that my performance is not up to par, then we cross that bridge when we come to it. But I would really like to figure this out and have this opportunity. I love this company. I love what I'm doing for this company. That's one of the reasons why I don't want to walk away from it. But I would really like to explore this opportunity outside of the hours that I dedicate to you.
I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah, I think it's, if you find yourself having to lie a lot and cover your tracks, then that's probably a huge red flag. But if you can have the type of transparent conversation that you just described, Elisa, and that's going to depend on what type of current employer you have and how
Mm.
open-minded they are. I mean, it's a risky conversation to have, right? But if you can have that, then I think you should, if you have those kinds of opportunities. But I do think red flags are like, if you're having to lie, if you're having to cover your tracks, if you're not living with your own true north in a way that it shows integrity, then you're going to drop a ball, to Vanessa's point, or something's going to happen that it's not going to go well. So this workforce that we're in now is a moving target, and it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Again, again, it's digital everything.
Mhm.
Everything has a digital twin, and LinkedIn is a big thing, and you just, something will slip through the cracks, and it's
Mhm.
just not worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, if a company truly values their employee and knows that what this employee is bringing to the table for them and wants to retain them, if this isn't a company that's going to be in direct competition, then the company has nothing to lose, I feel, by being supportive and letting that person
Mhm.
do this other job. Again, as long as it's not hindering their ability to produce what needs to be done
Mhm.
for them. And I think it's kind of, that the scope of what you do outside of work is what it's on you. And I do think that you don't want to burn bridges. You don't want to do something like this, not have conversations, if those conversations need to be had, and find yourself that you've burned all of your professional bridges because you were not able to do this successfully.
And from the employer standpoint, I mean, I feel like if I had an employee who I valued and they were doing really great work for me, And they came to me and they had that transparent conversation and said the things that you just said. Alisa, I love working here. I want to continue working here. I figured this out and I really want to give this other opportunity a try. I would be inclined to say, okay, thank you for your integrity. Thank you for telling me, yeah, I'm going to be watching your work performance probably more closely now because I know that you're trying to pack more into your life. But yes, go for it. And, let's just see where this goes. And I would hope that most organizations, if they have a great employee, would at least be open to that.
Absolutely. Especially on the financial side, if you know that you can't offer that employee double their salary and they're
Right.
able to do that in an effective way, working for another employer at the same time. I mean, yeah, give them the opportunity to try it out and see. And, and I even support the employer saying, hey, let's check in. Let's check in, once a month or whatever what have you, like just set up a schedule where we're checking in with each other and being transparent and continue it to see how it moves forward, because you don't want to say yes and feel like very confident in a situation and then in a few months say, oh my gosh, what did I do? So I think, again, we go back to the word respect and being mutually respectful of each other and the work relationship.
Absolutely.
Agree. Anything else that we haven't thought of?
I think, calling out the website, that if this is something people are, are kind of going back and forth on, overemployed.com is the website that's providing a lot of conversations around this and how to do it. But yeah, I just, companies there, while there are NDAs, non-competes and things like that, most companies, especially in this workforce, employees are at-will employees. So I think I think when it comes down to it, if you're giving your best and you're performing within the 40 hours a week or whatever it may be that's required of you to do your job, and you're not disrespecting the company in any way, shape, or form, and it's something that you're able to do, I think that you should explore it, but be honest with yourself.
Great advice, as
Thank
always.
you,
Thank
Alisa.
you.